got tied up in the civil rights movement, because that was during the 60s, and a very difficult time. And so I left veteran school and went to develop this program in Lowndes County, Alabama. Lowndes County, Alabama is actually the home of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party started in Lowndes County, and then it got hijacked to California with Huey Newton and others. And the program was designed to train people, migrant farm workers, to read and write so they could vote. And farm workers would come in after work, and they would be taught primarily reading, writing, but other skills also. But the Klan didn't like that. They didn't like that. So one day, it was on March 11th, I lived in Tuskegee. Tuskegee was probably 28 miles from Lowndes County in Hayneville, the capital. And I used to drive back and forth there. I got a call in the morning that the building had been burned down. They threw gas on the building and burned it to the ground. The Klan burned down 3 other churches in the area, burned them to the ground. When I first went there, we had a very difficult time getting the building for the office. And we had a probate judge, a white probate judge, helped me get electricity and a telephone. Now, because of that, the Klan poisoned 21 of his Black Angus cows. They burned this building down and threatened him. And that's how violent it was in the area. Well, it was very difficult for blacks to buy a home. Number one, I don't know if they read about that in Raising the Sun, but the government, when you get a mortgage, the government will, when you get a mortgage to a bank, the government insures that loan. So the bank, if you default on your loan, the bank goes to the government, and the government protects that loan, so the bank really doesn't lose money. But they would not, the government by law would not do that for Black Americans. So it's very, very difficult for Black Americans to get loans. And again, that's where you gain wealth in this country. For the middle class, you buy a house, you keep the house increases in value, and then you sell that house, you get another house, that house increases in value, and that's why many kids are able to go to college, because they're able to save money in that way. Well, we lived, after they bombed my church and bombed my office, the government asked me to come to Washington for a job. And I left my daughter and wife in Alabama, and I came to Washington to get a job and to get a home. It was an all-white neighborhood in Bethesda. Bethesda was about 98.4 white. So it's a white neighborhood, a nice tree-lined neighborhood, a very good neighborhood. And we wanted to buy this house, and we put a contract on it. We went home, told our parents about it, came back, and the realtor called us and said, can I come over and see you? They won't sell the house to you. And I said, well, why not? And they said, well, when I took your contract to the listing agent, she said, I'm glad you have a contract on the house, because I heard they're showing the house to colored people. And he said, well, in fact, this is the colored family who's buying the house. And she said, oh no. So she grabs the contract from him, runs out the house, and the owner of the house is coming up the steps. And she says, you don't want to sell a house to colored people. You don't want to sell your house to colored people. And he said, of course not. I'm not going to sell a house to colored people. And my realtor says, well, why not? And he says, I can't stand the owner said, I can't stand, and I would never stand for colored people using the same bathtub and toilet that my mother and sister used. That's how sick this country was. So,
like when Mr. Lindner came to the younger family and said that, you know, they didn't want them in the neighborhood, things like that, and there were all these restrictive covenants for African American families not to buy houses in white neighborhoods. This was the same situation when my parents bought the house that you're going to see that we're passing around here. That's the house where I grew up in for about 8-9 years until we moved to another house. And but when they bought that house, there was a restrictive covenant. They bought the house in 1969, 68, 69, and the restrictive covenant for this neighborhood that that house was in is called the Glenwood Restrictive Covenant. It was started in 1942, and it wasn't ended until 1969. So they were right on the edge of when this restrictive covenant was abolished. But this is what the covenant said. It said, subject to the covenants that no part of the land above described shall ever be used or occupied by or sold, demised, transferred, enveyed unto, or in trust for, leased or rented, or given to Negroes, or any person or persons of Negro blood, or extraction, or to any person of the Semitic race, which means you guys should know this from the night, of the Jewish race, blood or origin, which racial description shall be deemed to include Armenians, Jews, Hebrews, Persians, Syrians, and Turks, except that this covenant shall not be held to exclude partial occupancy of the premises by domestic servants of the owners of the land above described, the survivor of them, or his or her or their assigned. So, pretty much nobody could buy a house in this neighborhood except if they were white, including, you know, African Americans, anyone of other race, religion, natural origin, or anything like that, unless you were a maid, a gardener, something, a domestic servant of the owners of that house. So this was the covenant that my dad had to buy into that was just abolished right when they bought the house. So that's why there was this, you know, people were just like, no, we want you in this neighborhood, because they were going by this covenant of the Glenwood neighborhood.
that was a restricted covenant, but when they passed the open occupancy law, it did away with the covenant. So anyone could buy a house if they had the money, theoretically, in any part of the country. So I wanted to share that with you. But covenants only come because people allow them to happen, and everyone sort of agreed with it. A covenant in 1942. So in 1942, that's the way the United States operated. Martin Luther King, what he was saying, he believed it, and you want to believe in that too.